This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. And I am so honoured and privileged to welcome to our global audience today somebody that I've been following for at least 2 years, because without a shadow of a doubt, she was definitely one of the first people that I noticed that was sharing videos and really focusing on content marketing. Is a formidable business owner and thought leader, and I'm so beyond excited to welcome to you today. This is Stella Petrou Concha, and she's the CEO of Reo Group. She's an author. She's also on the board of the University of Technology. I might have got that wrong, but she'll say it right in a minute. And also the chair of 2020 Exchange. So welcome to you today, all the way from Australia. Stella, how are you?
Thank you, Leisha. I'm good. What an intro, my goodness. When you hear that record back to yourself, you think, no, that's not me.
It's like, I'm just me. And also, I forgot to say, serial entrepreneur, but you're also mum and looking very glamorous at the end of your day in your beautiful pearl necklace. For those who are not joining us on YouTube, you look gorgeous.
Thank you, Leisha. Special for you.
Oh, I feel very honoured. I really do. And we have to do a shout out, don't we? Because we got introduced by our mutual connection and our wonderful sponsor, Vincere, Eloise. So how do you know Eloise?
Well, we've just recently integrated Vincere into our business. So we're about 6 months in. So we're still rookies and learning, but enjoying the journey.
I bet you are. That's wonderful. Well, look, like I say, I wanted to get you on this show for a very long time, and I'm so thrilled that you joined us today. And we're talking about something that off camera we know is going to be a bit of a minefield, because it's something that's talked about. It's definitely one of the words or one of the phrases of 2022 from my perspective as a director, which is all about hiring on values, and it's all about purpose-led leadership. So for you, why do you think hiring on values is so important for leaders to think about?
I actually don't believe in values, believe it or not. I believe in behaviours. So, I think I think if you say values to someone, they get really confused by what that means. Values often are characterised by, large words like collaboration, but we don't really understand what collaboration might mean at a behaviour level. So I think first and foremost that if we're organising our culture around values, that potentially we might be running into some challenges if we can't very clearly articulate what are the behaviours that create those values. So, for example, we have a behaviour called We Seek Growth, and we've got a series of behaviours that we describe what growth looks like. And I really believe in giving people the framework of behaviours which is above the line and below the line. So when they come into your organisation and you say, we really want you to lead the behaviour or the value of growth, we'll actually know what you mean. Because growth for you is really different to growth to someone else. We all come from different cultures, from different eras, from different religions. So if you just use these bold words like values, you're bound to get yourself into trouble, and you're bound to lead people without clarity.
Yeah.
So how's that for the start? I don't believe in values.
No, I agree with you. And actually, I'm really pleased that you said that big words like collaboration, because it's sort of glorified speech, isn't it, for what does it actually mean? I'll speak to leaders all the time, as I'm sure you do, where they'll say, we want someone who's got integrity, we want someone who collaborates, and it's like, but what does that actually mean? So you're absolutely right. You've actually simplified it and clarified it, that we're talking about behaviours. So from you as a leader, what has your experience been on successfully recruiting on behaviours? Talk us a little bit about Reo Group, what you do, and then how you assess somebody on those behaviours, because I think we can learn a lot from how you do it, Stella.
I think first and foremost, what we've done is we've created a framework of behaviours that we believe are the right behaviours for our organisation that will essentially get us to our purpose, because obviously culture enables purpose, or culture enables goals and vision and purpose. So it's a framework. So we've been able to define what absolutely leading looks like, what being above the line looks like, below the line. And, the line for us is if you're above the line, you get to stay. If you're below the line, you're not part of the team. So if you can define what that looks like, what it means is that you can create consistency in the behaviours of your people, because every Monday morning meeting or every one-on-one, it comes back to behaviours at the end of the day. The other thing is that behaviours should drive goals. So if we look at KPIs or your lead on lag metrics in a recruitment agency, often one of the behaviours that leads to that is accountability. Okay, I'm accountable. So rather than going, did you do your candidate calls today? Did you do your client calls today? Oh, you didn't, you're in trouble. We actually go, well, look, accountability is one of our main behaviours. This is what accountability looks like. It means coming to work on time. It means answering the calls of your candidates. It means returning. It means logging your data. It means hitting your KPIs. This is what it looks like. Let's have a look at how you're manifesting the behaviours of accountability in your role. So the framework itself gives you the guardrails for your culture. It gives you the guardrails for your management team to actually manage their people. So that's the first thing. The second thing you asked is, how do you hire to it? Is that what you asked?
Is what?
How do you hire to your values?
How have you hired on those behaviours then? How do you measure that in an interview?
I'll give you like a really easy one. Okay. One of our behaviours is we seek growth. So we believe at Reo that growth only happens when you fail. So we believe that failure and growth are symbiotic in nature. You can't grow unless you're failing. We know that. So we ask a question in our interview. We say, so tell us about your biggest failure in life.
Wow.
What happened? How did you recover from that? What did you learn from that? And we assess things like stress tolerance, agility, ability to bounce back, and we test that we seek growth. Because if they say to us, I haven't really failed in my life, it probably means that they don't have that at a behaviour level, and therefore coming in.
Either, to say that, I mean, I think that's really interesting. I can't remember ever having a process where someone has asked that question. But actually, it says a lot more about somebody. How have you overcome a really bad thing that's happened? Adversity.
Yeah.
That strand. Now, it's interesting because when you said growth, I presumed you meant in some financial protection. You're talking about as a human being, the growth element.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Growth mindset. I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
And actually, I imagine that the people that work for you, because you've focused on that, because you're showing vulnerability then, aren't you? And so you're creating a much more open, honest culture, which again is what you talked about at the very start, which is why behaviours is important. So talking as a leader, and obviously a lot of our audience are leaders like yourself right across the globe, whether it's a sort of 1-2 person business or a massive scale business with thousands of employees. What's purpose-led mean? Because you said the whole reason we do behavioural sort of focus on behaviours is it helps you then achieve your purpose. So what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, most organisations have a purpose or a vision and a mission, which is how they get to their vision or their purpose. I think purpose-led leadership for me really comes down to the decision-making framework that organisations use to make decisions. Is the purpose at the centre of that framework? And also the management structure. Is the management structure centred around that? Because if you break down purpose-led leadership, it's not just, we're here for the people. That's, in my opinion, that's not purpose-led leadership. There's backstage leadership and there's front stage leadership. Front stage leadership is how you manifest to your people. And then backstage leadership are all the frameworks that govern that. It's not soft. This is hard stuff. This is how organisations are run and show the operating rhythm of the organisation. So for me, when I think about purpose-led leadership, is what is the operating rhythm of the organisation which allows you to fulfil that purpose, and how is purpose the main decision-making impetus for those decisions?
No, I totally agree with what you're saying there. That's I think for a lot of leaders listening, they're probably thinking, well, at what point have we moved away from what our actual purpose is? I think maybe some people kind of go with the flow quite a bit and they don't actually sit down and ever do that. It's an accidental growth strategy. Yeah. Whereas actually having a purpose, you start off with that purpose. So I'm going to throw something a bit challenging at you here then. Over the last certainly the last 2 years since COVID began and the global pandemic has sort of really stretched people's potential initial purpose of why they established, things may have changed. So if you're looking into your organisation and thinking, well, this is where we're at now, this is now our purpose, these are now our goals, and these are now the behaviours that need to allow us to achieve those purposes. What if there are some people that have maybe not adapted or evolved or have the old values or the old behaviours? What would you recommend? Because we don't want to make people, think about getting rid of staff, but what would you suggest to those leaders, first of all?
So vision and purpose changing happens in organisations from time to time. You probably have a vision or a purpose rejuvenation every 8 years, say, okay, when your brand changes. That's about the average. If from that your behaviours also change, there needs to be some change management and a period of time call it 6 months, where you move the entire culture to that. It takes time. You can't snap your fingers and go from one culture to the next. So first of all, there is a period of time. And when people behave, say below the line, or behave out of your new behavioral framework, you show them what good looks like. It takes time. But, there needs to be a line at some point. And if people don't want to be part of the team and be part of the culture, they are self-selecting out. But you know what? I have learned. I've been in business for 12 years. I have learned. I've been that sucker that's kept the person on because they can bill,
right?
But they have killed the culture. I've been there. I know what that feels like when you've got the cuffs on because you feel you can't do anything about it. And then I know what it's like to actually have one team that is united around one culture where people operate above the line with their behaviours. And what I've learned is that the collective outbills the one every single time.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I'm going to ask you if obviously we have a lot of our listeners are going to be billers and going to be recruiters, and actually what you've just described, that it does happen where a business, whether it's a leadership team or one individual, will literally overnight try and change a culture, and there's an absolute exodus, and it's a terrible strategy. It has to be something that evolves, like you say, maybe 6 months, 12 months, whatever. But I find that really fascinating. It's almost like, an English football analogy of focusing everything on the main goal striker, but actually as a team, you can probably score a lot more goals if you think that you're going to work collectively. So I find that really interesting. So it takes a braver leader to think about adapting and evolving, knowing that your purpose has changed. And I guess if people aren't along for the ride, then they're not part of your business anymore. It's quite...
I'll tell you something else, and this is probably going to be controversial, to be honest with you, but recruitment, we're an industry of small businesses. There are very few really, really large recruitment. There are large recruitment agencies that are listed, but the majority of us are all small business owners, and we've all been born into recruitment, or we've grown up in recruitment. Few of us have come out through corporate. So when you think about a lot of the owner-operators out there, I am not sure how many of them have gone to, say, business school, or if they have learned about fair process leadership, or if they have learned about change management, or they have learned about how to identify culture issues on the floor, how to change them. And I think that our industry needs to become more intelligent in how it runs as a business, as a collective business, because we're not. No. And then we've got like 55% turnover in our businesses, as a collective. Wow. We don't, but the industry does. There's an issue.
Yeah, the attrition in recruitment is something not to necessarily be proud of, is it? I totally agree with you on that. I don't know what the attrition rate here is in the UK, but it's significant.
I think it's 53% globally.
It's horrific, that, isn't it? It really is. And there's a lot to be said for it. And maybe my rather flippant remark before about, accidental success for a lot of leaders maybe wasn't so flippant. Maybe there was a lot of substance in that. And I agree with you, you don't do an MBA in recruitment necessarily. So I think what you tend to find is the landscape is, significant billers reach a point in a corporate, larger business where they say, I'm going to go and set up on my own. They then grow through success of having those relationships. But what you're talking about from a strategy point of view is really important. So because of the role that you have within the chair of 2020 Exchange and your board role within the university, so do you think that has elevated? Would you recommend other leaders to get involved in their industry?
What changed my life is that I went to business school. So This was 2 years ago. I started I will call it my formal education. I got a medical background, so I don't have a business background. I fell out of medicine and into recruitment. And when I went to business school, I went to INSEAD, I started learning. And I learned things that no one ever taught me. So recruitment doesn't teach this to you. It doesn't teach you how to run a corporation. It tells you how to do business development and run a sales floor. But what you're asking me today is about leadership and around how to run an organisation. And I went to school to learn. And, this year I'm sending 8 of my leaders to INSEAD, which is a business school, so they can also learn, because I think that if my ELT and my management team can go and learn, then the organisation will grow again.
I think in a way recruitment can be quite insular, can't it? Because even I'm thinking now about, people bring in non-exec directors, which is phenomenal. I love that approach. They get external training and development companies, business coaches, career coaches, and I'm being a little bit generic, but generally speaking, they're still recruiters, and it's all the same. We've all got different ideas, we've all got different life experience, but actually, I don't think of all the leaders I've interviewed, and we've done well over 120 episodes by the time this goes out. I don't think anyone's ever talked about actually taking that step back and thinking about ourselves as we are business leaders. And in order to be a successful business leader, it's not just about business development and how to recruit. It's actually running a business. It's all those different elements. So that's something. Yeah. I didn't ask you at the start. How did you go from medical to recruitment then? What happened?
I hated it. I thought I wanted to be a doctor all my life, and I hated it. I did my internship year. Mum got cancer, so I quit at the end of my internship year, took care of my mum for a year, and I started my first business, which was a cognitive behavioural therapy business. I was destined for business. I was never destined to be an employee of a hospital or anyone. And the reason why I fell into recruitment is because I had no career. I had nothing. I had a degree with nothing more. Right. And I got a job at Johnson & Johnson. They hired me as a rep, and it was weird. I think I applied to Robert Half because I had an ad on a job board that says earn $250,000 per year, and I was 22 or 24, and I applied and I got a job.
There you go. All the best people recruitment, Stella. That's the case. I think it's what you've talked about today is, I think, quite a eureka moment for a lot of people that are going to be listening. What would your advice be to leaders then, if they're looking at elevating their business? How would you summarize what we've talked about today? What would the key takeaways be from today's episode?
If you haven't got any formal education in running a business, go to business school. There's lots out there. Harvard, Stanford, INSEAD are the best. Just do yourself a favor and just enroll. The other thing that I would say is culture's not just governed by values. It's governed by the rhythm of the company. So whilst you might have a picture of the culture that sits up here, the question or the message is, well, what's the rhythm that governs it? What's your reporting rhythm? What are your lead and lag metrics? How do you support your people to achieve it? How do you keep them accountable? What are the meetings that you have? What are the frameworks that sit around that culture? Because culture's nothing without the guardrails. And that's where the energy goes into, and that takes time. That can take years to build.
Yeah, no, it really kind of, I really like the thought of that, because what you say there is that's almost like I'm trying to think of a good analogy here, but that's almost like the icing on top of the cake, but all the different ingredients, the eggs, the sugar, are all those different components you've talked about. You can't have one without the other.
That's such a good analogy, actually, like the recipe. So you've got the ingredients, and the ingredients are like your vision and your purpose and your values and your behaviours. They're all the ingredients. They're all there. But the method, what's the method? How do you put them together, and for how long, and to what quantities?
Yeah, it's true. And
the method.
I really like that analogy. Anything to do with cake is a great analogy anyway. And it's almost lunchtime here. It's not really. I'm recording this at breakfast. But no, I think that's it, because I like to simplify things, and I think I'm quite a visual person. But I think it's really important, because I think sometimes people focus on one thing more than another. There's no substance to what they're doing, or they're or they're so focused on those ingredients, but they don't actually think about how they're going to execute it. So I think that has been really enlightening, and you've got such a phenomenal reputation, Stella, and I can see why. You just incredible energy, and even from across the other side of the world, I can just feel your amazing spirit, and you must just be such a wonderful person to learn from and work with. So thank you very much for joining us, and we're really grateful for you being on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, Lisha.